Hello guys, and welcome back to Minecraft. I still haven't decided what I'm going to call this series, mostly because I'm still pretty much in the same recording session as the first two episodes. Last time talking a little bit about science and if it should be limited in some way. So today maybe a little bit about moral issues, slightly related but not exactly the same. And that's on the question of how to decide certain moral dilemmas, like how to decide what to do if faced with a certain moral problem. Because in many, there are certain things where there's a clearly right answer and a clearly wrong answer, and by and large everyone agrees what the correct answer is, but doesn't necessarily mean everyone does what the correct answer says, but people tend to agree on what the correct answer is. Like if you find a wallet in the street, the correct thing to do is to return it to its owner if you can find out who the owner is from the contents of the wallet. If you can't, hand it over to some sort of lost and found service. But of course, people tend to take the money and then hand it into the lost and found, and that way if the person gets back his stuff at all, he doesn't get back the money. Tends to be a very common way to do that. I think everyone is pretty much agreed that that is not the morally correct response, but it's not a particularly complicated moral issue. It's one where the answer is quite clear. On the other hand, there are problems where the answer is not so clear, and it can be quite difficult to even theoretically come up with the correct, I guess, response to that. When it comes to questions of decisions where basically both choices or all the choices you have are going to end up being rather terrible, and you somehow have to decide which one seems less terrible. Like if you have a choice between letting, I don't know, for example, let's say you're in a rather underdeveloped country, you have a hospital and two patients having the same disease, and you know they're both gonna die rather soon, but you don't have enough medication to treat them both. You only have enough for one. In Europe, or even in America, where my viewers might be coming from, or in let's just say in the civilized world, which again makes uncivilized world sound like such a bad thing, but I don't know. In advanced cultures that would not be much of an issue, but in jungle clinics or in lesser developed countries, availability of medicine is not something you can take for granted. It might well be that there is a cure or a treatment for the disease, but it's just not available, so people are dying from that disease still. There's lots of examples, and probably don't need to go into these. You should well know that such problems do exist. Anyway, the point is, people do actually face these choices from time to time. Not too commonly, but it does happen. So you can only save one person. Both of those people would die without the treatment, and how do you choose which one to save? And that's not a trivial question. Like, you can decide, I'm going to choose the one who's younger, but that doesn't necessarily have to be the right choice, simply because in a way you have to bet on which person has a more valuable life still ahead of him. And even saying that sounds really wrong. I mean, what's the value of a life compared to another? How could you make that call? But some doctor will have to make that call in that case. The only just answer, of course, like the only one where I guess any form of justice could be called, could be said to have occurred, is if you let both of them die. Of course, we all know that's definitely the wrong way to go about it, but at least it would be fair, right? And I'm not saying that should be a valid option, of course not. If you have the medicine to save either of them, you should definitely save someone. The question is not should I save anyone at all, the question is whom should I save? Obviously, massive difference. But it's quite clear that whoever one you choose, you're basically condemning a person to die. The one who doesn't get chosen will die of that disease. That's what the scenario says. But how do you decide? As I said, you could go by age, saying, I don't know, this guy's 40, this guy's 20, the 40-year-old guy has had more living, so if one of them has to die, let's let the one live who has more still ahead of him. But as I said, you're kind of gambling on the potential of what these people might still do in their lives. The 20-year-old might go ahead and become a great guy. He might save others in turn. Might be a quote-unquote good investment to save him. But the same goes for the 40-year-old guy. I mean, you can somehow say that you could look at what lives they've led so far and try and decide on that if they are an asset or a nuisance, I guess. If they're good people or bad people, but that's still a very subjective thing, and it's bound to occur that you can't decide. You have two nice people, basically. So who do you take then? And as I said, there's no right answer to this at all. Now, if it's about chances of survival or anything like that, you can again see whether, I don't know, you could say that the first person is likely to die anyway, even with the treatment. The other one is more likely to survive, so we give it to him. But in a way, that's a point where numbers just fail you entirely. There is no way numbers can give you the correct answer to problems like that. It's just never gonna work out. As I said, you can calculate the odds of survival, and you can try to assign values to how important someone is, but that just leads you to whole different problems where you have to decide on what numbers to use, and you're basically making your choice there already. That is I don't know, there's a name for that kind of method, but a certain type of person will tell you that the only way to resolve these moral issues is by assigning values to the outcomes and then just calculating which one's better. So that would be like the value of a human life is very high, so let's call that 10,000 points. The value of an animal life is worth less, so let's call that 1,000 points. Maybe the value of a dying person is less, so let's give that 5,000 points. But just by assigning those points, you've pretty much already made your moral decision. Because you've given ratios how important certain things are. You're saying, for example, just taking the numbers I just made up on the spot without thinking about them very much, you're basically saying, if I have to kill one human to save 11 animals, that's the morally right choice. Which it probably isn't, right? At least I would think it isn't, so I'm hoping you agree there. Might be depending on the animals. For example, if there's only 11 animals of a species left alive, and those are all that's left of them, so it's 11 animals killed and they're extinct. What do we do then? Let's say I have to save either the researcher, who is, I don't know, who's had an accident and needs care right now, or I save his the sample of the frogs he just collected, the last 11 that are still on the planet. What do? Do I let the researcher die? Do I save the frogs? Do I let the frogs die? And that's where the whole number thing just tends to fall apart. Because the very act of assigning certain moral values to those problems, or to those actions, that's where you're making your decision. You're not letting the numbers help you make the right decision. You're making your decision and then using numbers to justify that, basically. And it's just not something that numbers are good for. They are great for solving certain problems. How far can I drive with a full tank of gas? Petrol, for those not using that word. How long can I live with the money I have right now? How much money can I spend so I still have enough left to buy food at the end of the month? All that kind of stuff. Numbers, great way to solve them. The only way, really. Perfect tool. Do I kill the frogs or do I kill the researcher? Numbers just fail. You can say 11 frogs, fine, they're just frogs, they're amphibians, they have no higher intelligence, they are unimportant, and we're talking about a human being here, so we have to save him. On the other hand, we're talking about the last of those frogs, and it's just one researcher who probably values the life of an entire species higher than his own life anyway. So it's okay to let him die because we are really continuing his work. And which of those sentences was wrong? Well, neither, surely. And neither was right. They were opinions, and as is generally the case with opinions, they cannot really be wrong. There's certain opinions, quote unquote, which are definitely wrong. A lot of, well, racists, modern neo-Nazis, skinheads, on the political side of things, they will state that it's their opinion and that should be protected and they have a right to that opinion. And no, that's not an opinion. That's a crime and stupidity and nothing else. So there are certain things which people call opinions which are just dead wrong. But in this particular case, that just doesn't apply. And I know this is a slightly constructed example, so it's not necessarily the most realistic, but it's not that unlikely that you face these problems. And mostly these will be things or decisions you have to face in medicine, where you have to basically decide between people's lives. For example, less so these days, but it was more of an issue when medicine wasn't quite as advanced. But for example, certain types of cancer could be cured using bone marrow transplants. And if you found a good donor, well, if you found a close personal relative, basically, it was quite likely that the transplant would be successful, and the patient suffering from the cancer would be entirely cured. I think leukemia is a big one there. But there's certain other types of cancer, I think, which can be cured by bone marrow transplants. Still haven't found a cave, by the way. But there was a risk for the donor back in the days, because medicine wasn't quite as advanced yet. And this isn't so long ago. I think this is like 30, maybe 40 years ago, if that. The act of donating bone marrow was quite risky for the donor, and immensely painful as well, because they basically had to drill into your bones and suck out the marrow, and that was insanely painful. Like, painkillers obviously were administered, but there's limits, obviously. So in that case, you would say that one person's suffering is definitely worth the chance to save another's life. So yes, we are hurting one person, but that might save another person, so that's certainly morally advantageous, so we should do that. On the other hand, there's a risk that the other person, the donor, might die, and there's a risk that the patient won't be cured. And if we I don't know, play around with those numbers, if there's a 50% risk that the donor dies and a 50% risk that the patient doesn't get cured, you kind of have to wonder at which point do we stop doing these things? At which point is it morally wrong to risk one person's life to gain a chance at saving another's? Which is part of the reason why you don't do human testing in medicine, in trying to develop new drugs. Human testing is always the very last step after the new drug has gone through extensive animal testing and theoretical field lab testing. So the very final thing that's being done is tested on humans, and that's always done in very controlled environments. Because, well, no one would suggest that if we want to cure AIDS, let's just give a few 100,000 people AIDS and throw anything we have at them, let's see who gets cured. That sounds ridiculous just saying it. But surely, with all those people suffering from AIDS, the chance of finding a cure would be worth a certain amount of human lives. But medicine says no, we don't do that. You don't actively give people diseases to see if you've got a cure for it. At least that would be the vast exception in certain very special circumstances, I would guess. So it's really difficult to find answers to these problems at all, and at best you can find an answer that you're comfortable with. You're entirely unable to find the right answer just because there isn't one. Going back to the jungle doctor who can save one life and condemn the other to die. There are certain type of people who believe the answer just lies in numbers. As I said, you look at the person's life and you basically assign values to things he's done or things he could do. Does he have a high IQ? Does he have university education? Does he have a family? Does he already have children? And all that plays in. And some people will say he's already got children, so his genetic material has been spread, so that's a factor against him. Others will say he's got children, he's got a family to care for, so that's a factor for him. And that just goes to show how uncertain these arguments always end up being, because you don't know what the right answer is, because, as I said, there just isn't one. And as I also pointed out, that's really the point when numbers are becoming useless. They're not meant to solve moral issues at all. And I feel a lot of times these people are are hiding behind their assumptions of the moral value of certain things, and you can't accurately define or find the moral value of certain things. Like, it has been suggested that if you want to do certain research, high-risk research where you need subjects that are supposed to undergo at least, or at best, dangerous experiments, at worst, almost certainly fatal experiments, why not just take people who don't want to live anyway? Take people who are suicidal and give them fatal illnesses to see if you can cure them. I mean, they want to die anyway, so no harm done, right? Well, of course not. But it just goes to show how difficult it is to decide on these matters. And let me just see how deep I've gone. It should be an episode, by the way, so I'm gonna cut soon. Just wanna see if I'm deep enough, but I'm far from it. About 19 more blocks. I always build this down to bedrock level, so Y level 5. But yeah, as always, let me know in the comments if you have an opinion on these matters, if you have a different point of view, if you completely disagree, if you think I was completely wrong on a certain point, because I'm stating my opinions on these matters, and as I've pointed out, those might be different from your opinion. They can't really be wrong, at least tell me if you think I'm entirely wrong on certain points, of course, but most of the time opinions tend to not be wrong. And also, of course, if you have an issue that you would like to put forward and hear my opinion on, I will probably be responding to those kinds of questions in video form, so by the time the episode is released and I see the question, I'll put it into the next episode I'm doing. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and maybe you stop to think about things a little, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.